All right, let's dive into some of the research you sent over about wildfires. I'm really curious to hear what you found out about the causes of these massive fires. What really gets them going.
Yeah, when we think about wildfires, we often picture, I don't know, like a bolt of lightning striking a dry forest or something.
Right, right, like a
But
totally natural phenomenon.
yeah, exactly. But the truth is a little more complicated than that.
Oh, really? So lightning isn't the main culprit.
It's a factor for sure. But get this. In the U.S., humans are responsible for starting a staggering 85% of wildfires.
85%. Wow, I had no idea it was that high. So what, are people just carelessly tossing lit cigarettes out their car windows or something?
Well, that's certainly part of it. But there are all sorts of ways humans accidentally spark fires. Campfires that aren't properly extinguished, equipment malfunctions, sparks from machinery.
Right, and then there's arson too, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Arson is a serious problem, and it accounts for a significant number of wildfires each year.
It's kind of scary to think that so many of these devastating fires are caused by, well, us.
It is. It really highlights the need for greater awareness and responsibility, especially during those dry, hot months when vegetation is just primed to burn.
Speaking of dry and hot, your research also touched on the role of weather in all of this. It's like the perfect storm for wildfires is a mix of dry vegetation and a good strong wind, isn't it?
Absolutely. Wind can turn a small, manageable fire into a raging inferno in no time. It acts like a giant bellows, fanning the flames and pushing the fire to spread further and faster.
Yeah, it's like when you're trying to start a campfire and you gently blow on the embers to get the flames going. Except, with wildfires, it's on a massive and terrifying scale.
Right. And wind can do something even more insidious. It can pick up burning embers, called firebrands, and carry them for miles.
Wait, Miles? Seriously?
Seriously, these firebrands can land and ignite new fires, creating a domino effect of destruction. I think you mentioned Australia's Black Saturday fires.
Yeah, that's what came to mind when you mentioned firebrands traveling miles. It's crazy to think about these embers jumping highways and rivers and starting new fires. It's like the fire is multiplying before your eyes.
It's a real challenge for firefighters because they're not just battling one fire, but potentially dozens or even hundreds of new fires sparked by these windborne embers.
It sounds like something out of a nightmare. And then on top of all that, we have to factor in climate change, which is only making things worse, right?
It is. Climate change is essentially loading the dice in favor of more frequent and intense wildfires. We're seeing hotter temperatures, drier conditions, longer fire seasons. It's a recipe for disaster.
And didn't the research mention something about how climate change is affecting the fuel load in forests?
Exactly. Fuel load refers to the amount of dry, flammable material present in an area. With climate change creating hotter, drier conditions, forests are becoming more like tinderboxes, ready to ignite at the slightest spark.
So we've got human-caused ignitions, dry conditions, wind fanning the flames, and climate change contributing to a buildup of fuel load. It's like we're creating the perfect conditions for these massive fires.
Yeah, it's a complex issue with multiple factors at play. But the research is helping us to understand these dynamics better so we can hopefully develop more effective strategies for preventing and managing wildfires.
It's definitely a sobering thought, but I'm glad we're starting to understand the science behind these events better. So we've talked a lot about the factors that contribute to wildfires, but I'm curious, what's being done to actually combat these fires? What's the latest in wildfire management these days?
Well, one area that's seen a lot of progress is fire behavior modeling.
Fire behavior modeling. That sounds pretty high-tech.
It is. It involves using computer simulations to predict how a fire might spread.
So they're basically creating virtual wildfires.
Yeah, pretty much. These models take into account all sorts of factors like weather patterns, terrain, vegetation types, and even fire suppression efforts.
So they can run different scenarios and see how the fire might behave under different conditions.
Exactly. It's an incredibly valuable tool for planning and preparedness.
I can see how that would be super helpful for firefighters, giving them a better idea of what they're up against.
It is. These models can help them figure out where to allocate resources, where to position firefighters and equipment, and even make decisions about evacuations.
It's amazing how technology is being used to fight these fires.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And speaking of technology, another area that's really advancing is fire detection.
Fire detection. I guess traditionally it was all about lookout towers and people on the ground, right?
Right. But now we're using satellites, drones, and even artificial intelligence to detect fires earlier.
Wow, AI for wildfires. That's incredible. So how does that work?
Well, AI algorithms can analyze images and data from satellites and drones to identify signs of fire, like smoke or heat signatures.
So it's like having a constant eye in the sky, scanning for fires.
That's right. And the sooner a fire is detected, the faster firefighters can respond and hopefully contain it before it gets out of control.
I guess early detection is key.
Absolutely. And it's not just about detection. AI is also being used to help predict fire behavior and even guide firefighting efforts.
It sounds like AI is revolutionizing the way we manage wildfires.
It really is. And along with all this technology, there's also a growing recognition of the importance of incorporating indigenous knowledge into wildfire management.
Yeah, that was something I was really struck by in the research. It seems like indigenous communities have a lot to teach us about living with fire.
They do. They've been managing fire for centuries, using it to maintain healthy ecosystems and prevent catastrophic wildfires.
And now there's this movement to kind of blend that traditional wisdom with modern science.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can learn a lot from indigenous practices, like prescribed burning.
Prescribed burning, that's where they intentionally set controlled fires, right?
Oh, that's right. It's a way to reduce fuel loads and create healthier forests that are less susceptible to large destructive wildfires.
It's fascinating how something that seems so counterintuitive, actually setting fires, can be so beneficial in the long run.
It is, and it's a great example of how we can work with nature rather than against it to manage wildfires more effectively.
So it seems like there's a lot of progress being made in wildfire management with technology and indigenous knowledge playing key roles.
Yeah, there's definitely reason for hope, but there are also some significant challenges that we need to address.
We've talked about a lot of promising developments in wildfire management, but I'm sure there are still some obstacles, right? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges facing researchers and firefighters today?
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest hurdles is funding. Managing wildfires takes a lot of resources, personnel, equipment, research and prevention programs, all that stuff costs money.
Yeah, that makes sense. But is it just a matter of not enough money being allocated, or is there something else going on?
Well, it's partly that, but it's also the way funding is structured. Wildfire budgets often depend on the severity of the fire season.
So if it's a relatively quiet year, funding might get cut.
Exactly. And then when a really bad fire season hits, agencies are left scrambling to catch up. It makes it really difficult to plan and invest for the long term.
That's a tough situation to be in. And then there's the issue of development encroaching into wildland areas, right? We talked about that a bit before, but it seems like that just adds fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, it definitely does. More people living in fire-prone areas means more risk to life and property, and it makes firefighting much more challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine trying to contain a wildfire when it's burning through neighborhoods with houses and roads and all those obstacles.
Right. It's a nightmare scenario for firefighters. And then, of course, there's the big one, climate change.
Yeah, it feels like that's always looming in the background.
It is. Climate change is making everything worse. Hotter temperatures, drier conditions, longer fire seasons. It's like we're fighting an uphill battle.
It can definitely feel that way sometimes. But I'm curious, are there any bright spots, any areas where we're making significant progress?
Oh, absolutely. One area that's really exciting is the use of artificial intelligence in wildfire management.
AI for wildfires. Okay,
Yeah.
Now that sounds really futuristic.
It is. Researchers are developing AI algorithms that can analyze all sorts of data from weather patterns to vegetation types to help predict fire behavior and identify high-risk areas.
Wow, so it's like having this super intelligent system that can see patterns and make predictions that humans might miss.
Exactly. And it's not just about prediction. AI can also help guide firefighting efforts, suggesting the best places to deploy resources and things like that.
That's amazing. It sounds like AI has the potential to really revolutionize how we manage wildfires.
It definitely does. And along with AI, drones are also playing an increasingly important role.
Yeah, I've seen footage of drones being used to monitor wildfires from the air, but are they being used for anything else?
Well, right now, they're mostly used for surveillance and mapping, providing firefighters with real-time imagery of the fire. But researchers are working on drones that can do much more.
Like what?
Well, imagine drones equipped with sensors that can detect changes in temperature, humidity, and even the chemical composition of the air. They could relay that information back to fire crews, giving them a much better understanding of the fire's behavior.
It's like giving firefighters an extra set of eyes in the sky.
Exactly. And all these technological advances are great, but it's also important to remember that technology alone isn't the answer.
So what else is needed?
Well, we also need to focus on community-based fire management.
What does that involve?
It's all about empowering local communities to take a more proactive role in wildfire prevention and preparedness.
So things like creating defensible space around homes and being more aware of fire risks.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone has a role to play in protecting themselves and their communities from wildfires.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. It's clear that wildfires are a complex issue with no easy solutions, but it's also clear that there's a lot of amazing work being done by scientists, firefighters, and communities to try and get a handle on this problem.
I agree. It's a challenge, but it's one that we need to face head on.
hmm
And I think the more we understand about wildfires, the better equipped we'll be to manage them effectively.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. So, to all our listeners out there, stay safe, stay informed, and let's all do our part to prevent and mitigate the impacts of these powerful events.